Episode 13. Hi, what's up? Welcome to another episode of Reddit Readings. Today, we are hearing some disturbing stories from people who have worked in casinos or hotels. Reddit Readings, Episode 13. Housekeepers who worked in casinos or hotels, what's the weirdest thing you walked into? I think about this question every time I go to Vegas. Vegas housekeeping would be the highest rated reality show ever. I used to work on a military base as a housekeeper. I was there for about a month and a half. One time someone checked out early, so I had a room added to my list. Knocked, went in, and there was blood everywhere. I immediately called down to the front. I need help now. I was new. I was not prepared for this. Blood everywhere. It had soaked down through the duvet, layers of sheets to the mattress. There were bloody handprints everywhere. On the mirrors, on the headboards, on the back of doors, showers, carpet, the kitchenette, in every crack and crevasse of the bathroom, on the shower head, everywhere. Someone had decided to have a finger painting session during that time of the month with their boyfriend. Turns out some brass daughter had got a room while visiting dear old dad and had her Tinder date over. Daughter had enough foresight to tell her parents that she was on her period and may have bled through the bedding, but she was scared and didn't know what to do. When we said her date was accountable too, she claimed that she 100% didn't have someone else in the room with her. It was $1,800 to clean up that mess and replace everything, and dad was losing his mind over it, yelling and screaming the whole time. They kept saying there was no way that it should cost so much, calling us liars. After sitting in and listening, calmly, after being screamed at, my boss slid over the pictures to him. From that point on you could hear a pin drop. He got out his checkbook, wrote a check, and quietly left. I worked for a hotel chain in Colorado, and one day my co-worker and I went to strip a bed, and the bed was full of oranges. The dresser oranges. Side table, cans of mandarin oranges. Not exactly shocking or disgusting, but it was weird. I was a supervisor at a hotel in Canada about 6 years ago. A man's 80-year-old father called me one Sunday morning very worried about his son. He was supposed to meet him at 9 for breakfast but didn't show up. The father asked me to see if he was up in his room. I went up and knocked but no answer. I could hear the shower running, so I assumed he was in there. I slid a note under his door to call his father ASAP and went back to work. 40 minutes later the father called back asking if I found him. I went back up and was about to knock when I heard the shower still running, so I went into full-blown panic mode and entered the room. He was on the floor between the two of beds actively overdosing. Called 911 and hopefully saved his life. I have never heard anything more from them. Cleaning the room afterwards was super sketchy because there were needles everywhere. This couple made a hasty retreat from a 5-star hotel I was working for. They left an entire brick of cocaine on the bathroom counter. This one starts out benign enough. My NA shift starts, and I have a small line. It's Saturday and we're near a couple of casinos. Not unusual. A very polite man checks in and rents a top-level suite for him and his wife. I get him in and start checking in the next couple. Being distracted, I barely noticed the previous couple come back in, only that the wife was partially obscured by the luggage cart, and I remember thinking to myself, that's an ugly woman. The night is quiet and I leave. I come in the next night to hear what unfolded after I left. The couple never came back down to check out and have not been seen since. When housekeeping entered the room they immediately alert the FDM. Every surface of the room is covered in lube. The bed, the couch, the jacuzzi, even the mini fridge is covered in bottles and bottle of lube and baby oil. We know for sure it's lube because a dozen bottles are left in the tub. But wait, there's more. In addition to the lube, there is a rather large horse dildo left behind with thick black scuff marks and cracked down the center. My FDM, in her infinite wisdom, decides that they must have been junkies, and this dildo is where they are hiding their needles. She decides to pick it up to open it for safety reasons, but when she does, all that falls out is a rather impressive motor that has been burned out. The icing on this cake comes when they review the security tape. The quote-unquote wife is clearly a man in a wig. It's a big burly dude, wearing a cheap wig. Hotel worker. Had an American guy come into our hotel, meant to be staying for 3 days. Went into his room and never left the room in over 2 weeks. He kept phoning down to extend his stay. The strange thing was, he had the same routine every day. Around 8 AM, he would order 8 bottles of beer and 20 cigarettes to be sent up to his room. He'd sign the check off to his room for the beers but had to pay cash for the cigarettes as they came from the hotel shop, which wasn't owned by the hotel, therefore wasn't able to charge to the room. The cigarettes came to around £11, and he would always give us a £20 note and told us to keep the change. Lunchtime rolls around, and again, 8 bottles of beer and 20 cigarettes. Come dinner time, again, another 8 beers, but 40 cigarettes this time, assuming to keep a stock of when the shop closed at night time. This happened every day he was staying with us. No one ever saw him leave the hotel, so assumed he had a stack of £20 notes to pay for his cigarettes. He also instructed housekeeping not to clean his room. When he eventually left, the maid was greeted with hundreds of empty beer bottles. The bin was half full with cigarette ends and ash, and the room was left remarkably clean, albeit smelling awful. We tried to research the guy, but could only find he was part of an American broadcasting company. It was a long time ago and can't remember, so assumed he was over here to lie low. He checked out, paid off his bill, didn't even bother to check the bill, into a taxi and never to be seen again. I walked in on a couple sleeping on the bathroom floor of a hotel room. In the hotel I work for, the bed was untouched and everything was normal with that one exception. Not a housekeeper, but I was a bartender at a Marriott hotel years ago. Along with regular bartending duties, I also delivered bar orders as part of room service. One night I received a typical order, wine and beer, from a room that called down to the bar. I brought the drinks to the room and was greeted by an early 50s man wearing a white robe. He greeted me and asked me to place the drinks on a dresser fairly close to door. As I went to place the drinks down, I noticed the bed had between 10-13 dildos laid out neatly along the foot of the bed. The sizes ranged from normal to horse. They were evenly spaced and all facing towards the headboard. While he was signing, I made my way to the door, and as soon as he handed me the book I smiled and said, "Thank you, have a great night." He just smiled and that was it. 0% acknowledgement on his end. Worked housekeeping for a few weeks. Guess the weirdest shit was a 70-ish couple left their room, so I went to clean it. Big bottle of KY, and a dildo so big even Ron Jeremy would have been jealous, left out on the bed. I was a housekeeper at a dive of a hotel in Chico, California in the late 90s. A week or so before, a local homeless woman had stuck her arm in a tiger's cage, a circus that was traveling through town, and got mauled. That weekend I was cleaning rooms and knocked on the door of a room paid for by a local charity organization. It turned out the guest was in the middle of sexy time. Quickly realizing it wasn't a good time to clean the room, I said I would come back later. To my dismay, the woman opened the door and asked me to join her and her friend. I declined. She then reached out and grabbed me by the arm and tried to drag me in. Her arm was covered in bandages and lacerations. It was the woman who had been tiger mauled. I yanked my arm free and ran away. I'll never forget what her shredded bandage hand looked like. We had a hotel room one time, and checked in around 3-4ish. Can't remember what hotel it was. When we walked in, one of the housekeepers was asleep in the chair. Apparently had taken a rest and checked out, for who knows how long. We woke her up when we came in the room. She was very apologetic and took her cart and stuff with her right away. We never said anything to the staff or saw her again. The room was all clean and set up, so nothing to complain about. If she is anything like the housekeepers I know, that was one of many jobs. Working double shifts isn't uncommon, and many of those ladies work extra when offered. You are good people for not saying anything. In the late 90s I had a roommate who managed a hotel in Manhattan. He came home one night and told me they found a 3-foot nitrous tank in one of the rooms. They disposed of it personally. These days they would probably call the bomb squad. Someone I know worked housekeeping at a casino. He walked in on a guy smearing shit over the walls with his bare hands. He was pissed that he lost money and thought he was justified to do it. Housekeeping called security. He was charged and banned. I worked in a casino where I watched a middle-aged man literally shake a solid turd down his pant leg, sit back down and continued on his machine. I turned around with backpack vacuum on and went to my lunch break. I didn't get paid enough to pick up strangers' shit. Not my story, but a friend was a maid at a cheap hotel in our university town. She has a bunch of gross and weird stories, but the most insane is when she came into work and found a full abandoned meth lab in the bathroom of one of the rooms. Her manager made her clean up a bunch of trash from the different ingredients and scrub chemical stains that must have been left by spills. Apparently the room smelled like a bad science experiment, or just normal meth, and the management refused to get any police involved. I imagine they believed it would discourage their regular clientele. I believe she quit very soon after. This is related but not exactly the question. When my wife and I were looking at wedding venues, one we went to was a hotel. The event manager wanted to take us up and show us the honeymoon suite. She opened the door, and there were two old men, like 60s 70s, shirtless, drinking vodka in the room. She was so extremely embarrassed and apologetic. She was very sweet too, but you could tell she was so mad at whoever screwed that up for her. We didn't choose the place, wasn't why, but I hadn't thought about that in a while, and figured someone else may get a kick out of it. Found a dead body under the bed, Manhattan. Was on a youth trip with my church. Guys stayed in one room, girls stayed in the other. All us bored kids start looking around the room, you know, because kids, and we found a nug of weed under the bed. Super big find for a couple of church kids. We go to tell the girls what we found and they go on to tell us they did the same thing and found blood all over the wall. I was an IT guy for a casino. Got a call that a guest couldn't get his device connected to the Wi-Fi, so I had to go up and give him a hand. Come to get his tablet connected. He's in the room. Older guy, 60 plus, wearing a pair of gold booty shorts. He's got 3 girls. IDs meant they had to be 21, but they weren't much more than that, in there with him. Thongs and fuzzy high-heeled slippers. Topless. Shameless. They want to connect the iPad so he can play some video to go along with the game they're playing. Couple bags of toys and tubes of stuff scattered all around the room. 2 of the girls were getting impatient and already playing with each other by the time I got there. I've got my own kinks, so who am I to judge? Got his stuff connected, and they were able to get his movie, and got it playing on the TV in the room. He tipped me a small baggie of Molly and a couple $100, all in $50. I took the money and let him keep the drugs. Find out later, he was a VIP card member and typically dropped $20 grand or so on the tables. Had a teacher who was the manager of a Marriott in Germany for a while. She has wild stories. Once found an anaconda in the bathroom, wrapped around the shower curtain pole, pulled naked. Devil worshippers, out of the pool at 3 a.m. when the pool closed and they refused to get out. They weren't even guests. Saw the janitor with a wheelbarrow, a hose, and a shovel. He went somewhere, went to lunch and came back. After his lunch, she followed him and asked what was up. He didn't speak good German and just said, "Cleaning up African lady leg." Turned out some lady had jumped from the top floor of one side of the building. Hotel was kind of like an L shape, one side higher than the other. Hit the emergency ladder on the way down and had her leg torn off before becoming mush on the roof of the other side of the building. He had shoveled most of her into the wheelbarrow at this point, was just working on getting her leg unstuck from the ladder. A couple came to this luxury dude ranch I worked at, and spent over $5,000 to stay there, only to not come out of their room the entire time. Went in to clean the room when they left, and saw incredibly expensive and opened alcohol and boxes of sex toys around the room. On the bed they left a note that said enjoy. What? We threw out the toys. Who the fuck would use a used sex toy left by an unknown person? And got hammered that night. Not me, but my friend from Ukraine, worked at a crappy casino hotel in Wendover, Nevada, because they would sponsor his work visa. He wasn't a housekeeper but would have to do maintenance in rooms. He said one day he went to a room where the people had already checked out and there was a chicken in the room. Like a live chicken, just chilling there. Maybe the story is funnier when he tells it with his accent. Why use chicken in the room? I used to work in reservations in a big chain hotel in London. Housekeeping once told us there was one regular guest who used to always leave a single whole intact raw egg in the bed when they checked out. Nobody ever figured out why or where on earth they got that single raw egg in the middle of central London. Grocery stores aren't frequent in the area and they certainly don't sell eggs one by one. My grandfather used to work at a posh resort where many celebrities checked in. He told us that Bill Cosby always trashed the room and left behind a huge mess with no tip for the housekeepers. This was back when Cosby was viewed as America's dad. Now it doesn't seem strange at all. I've answered similarly before, but here's a brief summary of my favorites. I have 10 plus years in hotels, duffel bag with 10k in cash. The security guard who found it returned it. Once we had a guess that was the focus of a counterfeit investigation. How did we know this? The agents who were investigating rented a room near theirs and told us. Why the frick they thought that would be a good idea when hotel workers are gossipy little shits, I don't know. Somehow it must have worked because the arrests were made a few days later. Worked in a hotel that allowed pets with a small deposit, so the number of animals was unreal. The dogs, cats were fine, but what got my goat was the folk that tried to avoid paying the fee and pretended they didn't have an animal. Okay, whatever. You don't like spending money any more than the next dude, but the problems arose when we needed to get into the room, maintenance, cleaning, and had zero idea to expect an animal. Almost everyone who worked there had a story of being bitten by a dog at some point. On the further subject of unexpected animals, we also encountered a bear, a young cub, an alligator, 3 feet plus, in the tub, a capuchin monkey, a box of chicks, etc. These were actually all from one particular guest who worked in the TV industry. The worst part about it was that cleaning his room was a crapshoot. He'd swear blind he wouldn't have animals in the room, and then, boom, alligator. So of course the poor housekeeper WTF's out of there, and then dude would get home at 10-11 PM and scream at us about his room not being cleaned. We'd explain that we don't clean rooms with loose wildlife, and he would categorically deny that there were any animals in his room. Point blank, over and over, even if we had pictures. It was fucking bizarre. Also disturbing was the trend of people abandoning animals, dogs and cats, getting away from animals. It was also pretty common to find guns. I was working in operations in this hotel around the time of Sandy Hook, and we found several. Our working theory was that people felt unsafe and started carrying, but they weren't used to it and inclined to forget them. We generally would give it a few hours, then turn them into the cops if no one called to reclaim it, depending on the hotel. Sex toys are so common we don't think about them, just trash them. Honorable mentions, fake IDs, not for underage drinking. Dude was older, all kinds of drug paraphernalia, unexpected dead people. Oh, and the cat hoarder that had 14 cats in a small 300 square featuring room, with no litter boxes. Hotel had to hire a biohazard team to take the room apart when that guest was evicted. They did it in full hazmat suits. I don't know about them, but I was working on a job in a shady part of Yakima, Washington called Yakima. We were working 12 14-hour days. I just left my gun in the drawer, and I'm not a cluttery person, so I just empty my pockets into the nightstand drawer every night. One day I left my gun, a roll of duct tape, some big zip ties and a knife in the drawer. When I came back, room was clean and the drawer was organized nicer. After that, the housekeeping lady would scuttle away upon my visage. Okay, I've got hotel stories for days, but I'm just a desk clerk, not a housekeeper. Those women work harder than just about anyone you'll meet and deserve tons of respect. Be good to your housekeepers, people. That out of the way, I'm working the graveyard shift many years back. It's just me there, and a public space attendant. He was one of many Alexes that worked that shift, so I don't think it's too revealing to use his name. Anyway, he'd appreciate the infamy. So this night I'm plugging away on some numbers and he radios me in hysterics insisting I come up to the second floor. So I grab my keys and jump in the elevator, and when the doors opened on the second floor hallway, I nearly lost my lunch all over the elevator. Immediately outside the elevator, there were brown, lumpy clumps hanging off of everything, dripping in repellent stalactites from the ceiling, stippling the walls and doors, tracked in huge streaks across the carpet, glistening wet and awful everywhere you looked. Next to one of the doors were all of the bed linens from a room that looked like someone took them mud wrestling. It was horrific and completely surreal, and my jaw dropped open. Then, without missing a beat and before my brain could even finish jumping up on a chair and squealing you like a housewife seeing a rat, he grabs this wad off the wall, tosses it into his mouth and swallows it in front of me. No shit. No shit. In fact, as he proudly announced, seeing as I was turning green, some absolute monster had emptied a quart, just shy of a liter if memory serves, can of refried beans into their bed sheets, mushed them all together, and then taken that mess into the hallway in front of their room and shaken them out like an old drug or a wet dog, flinging beans onto every surface for an impressive distance in every direction. Alex, seeing me turn green with horror, laughed for pretty much the rest of the evening. The next day management charged the guests a ridiculously small cleanup fee considering the scope and maliciousness of the mess, and they never offered any explanation as to why they had decided to bean spackle the whole way. Why was Alex so metal as to eat recently in a bed currently on a wall foodstuffs, just to fuck with me? You kinda had to know him, but he a commitment to comedy and chaos that I remember very fondly to this day. Dude was as awesome a partner in crime as you could ask for. So I was doing one of my first few overnight desk shifts at a hotel. It had been a fairly quiet night until this point. I go into the server room behind the desk and there's water pouring from the ceiling, like literally just pouring out over all of the computers. So I call my on-duty security guard and my management team, who tells me to have my security guard go to every room above the server room until they figured out where the water was coming from. He finally figured it out around 4-6 floors up. So he gets to the room and sees water spilling out from under the door, so he knocks. No answer. Repeats this a couple times. Deadbolt was locked, so the master key was useless. He finally gets in. Maintenance came up with the deadbolt key thing, and this dude is laying on the bed stark naked, spread eagle, and this was a big dude, and there's a lady of the night also naked, passed out in the shower with it on full blast and her ass over the drain. She flooded 5-6 floors of rooms, one room per floor, all the way down to the server room. I've been a hotel manager for about 5 years. A year of that was spent in housekeeping, and the worst was a chick who had overdosed on something and smeared shit literally all over herself in the bathroom. The smell was indescribable. There were dildos and syringes everywhere too. Her boyfriend tried to call us and say she had just forgotten to take her insulin that night. I think I showered like 10 times after work that day. Most recently, the weirdest thing we found was a cat. Some dick had left a cat in his room and trashed it. The cat had no food, no water and no litter box, but was the sweetest little dude ever. The owner called back and tried to get his cat, and we lied and said we turned him over to animal services. He's happily living with another manager now. Another time, another manager and I were inspecting rooms and she radioed me to say there was a brown smudge on a pillow and she wasn't sure if it was shit or chocolate. She asked me if she should touch it and I said yes, like an asshole. It was shit. I worked as a concierge for an upscale hotel, so, naturally, because there wasn't a line for my desk, I fielded complaints regularly. One day a woman, very nice and patient, rare, calmly explained to me that a 5-year-old opened the door to their bathroom and there was a housekeeper pooping in there. The housekeeper and the boy screamed so loudly that I had already gotten noise complaints from the adjacent rooms. Needless to say, that family got a free night and an upgrade. When you gotta go, you gotta go. Thank you for listening to Reddit Readings episode 13. And if you enjoyed it, consider subscribing and leaving a rating.